Yes, friends, on a Wednesday morning. Back on track as we ever were. The offseason continues to roll on with varying degrees of commitment to days and times. The point is we bring you content, and we'll get there. We'll get there in the end. It's training camp for the podcast as well. We're getting ourselves back into rhythm, back into tune. I'm Adam Armbrecht, as always, host of the One Giant podcast, also covering the Brooklyn Nets on the Locked On Nets podcast, joined by the generational New York football Giant fan that is the healthy, wealthy, and wise Mr. Andrew Makowitz.
You know, Adam, this morning I'm lucky enough. I've a friend of the show, Matt. I'll leave his last name off because who knows if he told his boss whether he was working today or not. Invited me up for a nice little golf tournament this afternoon. So I'm rocking the golf attire. I'm excited to get out there and swing. I took a vacation day like a normal adult does, you know.
Right. I didn't try to hide what I was
up to. I
didn't
play hooky. It wasn't Ferris Bueller's Day Off over here at my house, you know.
Oh, it's I think it started in the back of the throat, but now it's in the front of the throat, and we know what happens next. I'm not even going to go into the details, but I'll be back tomorrow. I will say, over the last couple of days, I'm a disc golf enthusiast. I enjoy it. I've been enjoying a lot of interesting games over the course of the Olympics as well, but I saw out in Oregon was the a professional disc golf tournament, an open. All these, I'm going to keep it clean, MRFers are out there wearing golf attire. Like they're wearing crisp pants with like the shoes and the collared button shirt. You know, what happened to the carefree days of just a man with unkempt hair, smelling of patchouli oil, maybe having a toke of the sweet Chiba as he plays a quick 9 before getting back to work off his lunch break? The game has changed, Andy, and it stings a little.
You know, it is funny that you say that because it's like, you know, people that play Frisbee were also the people that played hacky sack in high school, right? And it's like you have a certain lane that you stay in, and then all of a sudden they're like, well, we have to use these golf courses to play, so let's look like we're Ernie Els or Tiger Woods or whoever you want to say. It's like, you know what? Like, if you're going to go for it, go all in. Like, you should be wearing like tatty clothes, you know?
Hearts. I mean,
Grateful Dead t-shirt. Like you gotta do something different, you know?
Where's the tunes? Where's no one blasting any music? It doesn't matter. The point is, I've been watching a lot of sports, a lot of very different avenues, and it's upsetting nonetheless. But speaking of a global perspective, tie that in. How about we go around the league a little bit here for a couple of notes from the NFL? As training camp moves along, we'll get into a small injury for the Giants in a little bit. But, you know, training camp is tricky because teams are starting to ramp up and have this sense of what they're going to be this year. And then a little tweak here and a little injury there. And all of a sudden, things get really derailed. And there's already a couple of quarterbacks that are maybe dealing with some issues.
Yeah, so a couple key ones. First and foremost, in the division, Dak Prescott, obviously coming off that terrible ankle injury that he suffered against our New York Football Giants, has a little bit of a shoulder issue, and it's crept up in camp. It doesn't sound like it's great, but it doesn't sound too serious. The Cowboys have come out and said, you know, hey, it's sore. We're gonna take him back very, very slowly, and with good reason. There's no reason why they need to rush him back during training camp when he's already getting a bunch of reps in and practicing anyways. I think the other quarterback that's much more interesting is the Carson Wentz situation. Right.
That's the AFC Eagles, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, the AFC Eagles with Frank Reich and Carson Wentz. You know, he has a knee injury that he's expected to be out. I love this. 5 to 12 weeks is the time frame that they're putting on it. And if you see the video of Tennessee Titans coach Mike Vrabel, they're like, oh yeah, Carson Wentz. Do you know the timetable they gave? 5 to 12 weeks. He's like, oh, that just so happens that like we play both of our games right smack and like right when the 5 weeks start and right when they're like, oh, weird that it's a division that they're trying to like play games with, right? It's like so funny. But I have a question for you. So we knew Carson Wentz was injury prone. This was one of his problems outside of not being able to throw to his teammates when he was in Philadelphia last year.
A lot of things into being a quarterback.
You know, the I know this is not a Colts podcast, but it's a really philosophical question. He's going to be out. They have Jacob Eason, who's never thrown a pass in the NFL, as their backup. They have lofty expectations to make the playoffs and make a run this year. You know, their first 5 games are brutal against people like the Rams and the Ravens. Almost impossible. You can't go 0-5 or 1-4 to start. No. There's a lot of chatter about how the Colts should trade for one third string quarterback, Nick Foles.
Oh yeah.
Listen. And I wanted to get your take on it. What are your thoughts about that?
Well, I mean, Nick Foles, for whatever he is or is not, but at his best was when he was with the Eagles, was with Frank Reich there. You know what I mean? So I think it's easy to kind of laugh at it and be like, really, Nick Foles at this point? But I do think that was the best version of him. And if you're talking about trying to survive, if you go get Nick Foles and he can run you to a 2-3 record over the first 5 games, that's a win. You've done your job and there's familiarity there. So he'll be at his best in that system if you give him that look. I think it makes sense. I actually find it more, from the Carson Wentz perspective. He's like, I can't get away from this guy. He's like, I get drafted in Philly. He's there. I go down. He wins a Super Bowl. I come back. He's still there. He's still, so I wonder if Carson Wentz looks at it as like, no, I don't want you to go sign Foles, because what if my injury lingers on? Like, I could relive this exact same scenario again here with the Colts that I had with the Eagles, where I'm looking over my shoulder. And I'm not even knocking Wentz being a former Eagle, but the mental makeup there was a part of what went into the issues with Philadelphia of maybe not being a total team guy, kind of looking himself as being above other players. So now you're going to introduce this element where you go, yeah, we brought someone in just to see how it goes. What do you know? Oh, no, Nick. Yeah, you know Nicky. Yeah, you remember him from the Philly days, don't you? And then all of a sudden, maybe Carson Wentz is having some of the same issues he had once upon a time.
That was my first thought. Adam was like, oh, we're going to do this all over again. But then I realized, like, the NFL's a business. Like, they saved Carson Wentz by bringing him to Indianapolis and, like, trying to resurrect his career because it was on very shaky footing in Philadelphia. Like, you know what? Grow up. Stop getting injured. Stop throwing the ball to the other team, Carson Wentz. Like, if you can't beat out third string Nick Foles, who is behind Andy Dalton, is behind Justin Fields in Chicago, if you can't beat him out, you don't deserve to start. So bring in another backup so that the team can benefit from it. So, like, to me, that it's not a big deal. The one thing I will say is, if you saw the Nick Foles press conference, my goodness, he basically was like, Frank Reich is the greatest coach in the history of the NFL. I have never played harder or better than under anyone else other than Frank. He knows me. He gets me. And he, like, you could see him going really crazy. He goes, as of right now, I'm a Chicago Bear. It's like, oh, okay, Nick, we can read between the lines. We know what you want to have happen, but I've never seen someone pander.
Color. He loves the sandwiches. He knows the midnight snacks I need when my tummy hurts and I can't get to sleep.
He watches my dog when I'm on vacation. Like, yeah, exactly.
Right.
So
we took a long walk on the beach the other day.
It's so good. I just think, all these injuries around the league are telling, early in training camp, it brings up all these questions. And to be honest with you, Adam, there was the chance for an injury at Giants training camp recently, right?
Well, there was, yeah, and this is what makes the offseason interesting, because teams are going to take hits like this potentially, and it completely shifts divisions and perspectives on who is going to or not going to make the playoffs. The quick footnote out of Giants training camp was that Kenny Golladay tweaked his hamstring, non-contact, running a route, reached for it, walked off under his own strength, went into the training room. And that, in the same way, right, a guy coming off who has some injury concerns, something like that is just where you go, okay, they said no big deal. Just let me see you right back at practice the next day, please. Because if you don't, then it just, any of these things, I feel like this is that perspective of, it's a very delicate balance. When everything is healthy and everything's working, it's good. As you start to see these injuries come up, Shane Lemieux is on that list, Kenny Golladay with a little tweak. Now you start to, the structure starts to shake a little bit, and you're wondering if the foundation is sound.
Can we just put Kenny Golladay in bubble wrap for like 2 weeks? Like can we just get through the next couple of weeks? I need him to catch one ball in preseason so that Daniel Jones sees him catch a ball in live action, and then bubble wrap him, put him off to the side, ice him down, and get him ready for week 1 against the Broncos. I just can't take any more injuries for any Giants, whether it's minute or not.
Now, what you'd like to then probably see is, let's keep Kenny Golladay and maybe some of the other key figures on the Giants football team away from the brawls that may break out, and in fact did break out at yesterday's practice. Listen, I have my perspective on this in general, and the way media reacts to these pieces. It happens every year in training camps all across the league. That being said, though, within the brawl, or within the inciting, what was the inciting force that led to the brawl? Because I think there's a couple of elements inside of it that that I do find enjoyable and maybe can be motivational for a couple of players.
All right, so Corey Clement, who's trying to make this roster, catches the ball. He's moving downfield, and as the play's coming down, winding down, Xavier McKinney gives him a shot.
A little pop,
and a little pop. We just saw the video of it this morning. It's a small clip that Paul Schwartz, I think, has on his Twitter or Instagram. It's a hit. He knocks him down to the ground. Pro Bowler Evan Ingram takes umbrage with it because that's his teammate. And shoves his other teammate, Xavier McKinney, basically for saying, like, what are you doing? Why are you hitting him that hard in practice? And then add to another layer of it, Logan Ryan comes from behind and shoves Evan Ingram a la Patrick Beverly and Chris Paul in the NBA playoffs, where it's like you see their neck snap back and he like shoves him to the ground. And that leads to an all-out brawl at him.
With Daniel Jones, somewhere in the fracas at the bottom of the pile as well. So here's the thing on the surface, from the action of it all. Guess what? Corey Clement, that's what you're there to have happen to you. You're there to have Xavier McKinney, who didn't get to play a full season his rookie year, who's trying to get himself into the flow, who's feeling a little chesty. He's our young stud on the defensive side. Pop, take a pop. That's you're there to be a punching bag. I don't know any other way to put it. Like, that's exactly what you're there to do, is to have a defensive player feel like he's really hitting his stride. And oops, went a little too far, gave you a shot. Now, I don't hate Evan Ingram coming into it, because I just wonder about Evan Ingram's demeanor. I wonder about his dedication, his motivation, right? All the things that we talk about with him as far as being a player that is going to finally meet expectations. I like that he mixes it up. And Logan Ryan afterwards, I mean, he had the quote around the idea, just to paraphrase, we're tired of losing. We want to win games here, some of the cliche stuff. But he even went as far as to say, the organization invested money in this team this offseason, brought in guys on both sides of the ball. Like, this is about winning. This is about showing up and putting in the work at practice. And yeah, it's going to get a little physical. In the hierarchy, like, most important this year, at the end of the day, it's going to be Xavier McKinney. Then maybe it's Logan Ryan, maybe it's Evan Ingram technically, if you believe in Evan Ingram, and then somewhere at the bottom is Corey Clement. So I think it makes sense. Like, that's the hierarchy of how this looks. Evan Ingram, I like you being a good teammate, but you're protecting someone that may not be on the roster in a week.
Okay, look, so there's a lot to unpack here and on what you're saying. I understand what you're saying is these fringe roster guys need to work hard, play hard. They're going to take shots from some of the guys that we know are going to be around here. I get that. Where I think you're misstepping, Adam, is that Corey didn't care about any of it. If you read all of his quotes, he basically said, like, we all understand the nature of the game. When you get hit, you stand right back up. I've gotten hit hundreds of times. I'm going to get hit again. He goes, the only thing that sucks is when you see these hits and then all these shoves, and all of a sudden the brawl goes out. While it's fun to like tackle each other and pile on, he goes, we all know that we're running laps and we're running and we're doing suicide sprints. He's like, that actually was the worst part of it for me, was like being in this pile of like people upside down, left and right. And like Joe Judge is screaming, blowing the whistle. And they're like, oh, yes,
we're going to have to run. No, it's fine. I like getting hit.
No, so I mean, by the way, that's such a football guy mentality, right? It's like, you could hit me as hard as you want while I'm having the football. The thing that stinks is like having to do wind sprints because we all got in a fight, right? Like, that's what he was upset about.
And they did have to do the wind sprints. They did have to do push-ups, and they did have to listen to a profanity-laced tirade from Joe Judge. And so this is the funny thing about it too, right? So, I mean, it's on all sides of it. When they say, this will be a galvanizing moment for this team, any team around the league, I think that's silly. Like, and these are all players that are working hard. They're trying to get better. I think that's silly. I think it's silly when they say Joe Judge teetering the line of, being a hard-nosed coach and sounding like a high school cheerleader, rah-rah nonsense and blah, blah, blah. Like, all of these perspectives around what it is or is not and what's happening. I think it's good that it gets a little chippy. It's good that it's physical. It's good that players get involved, and it's fine, because guess what? Every single player that's coming, it's Corey Clement's comments, right? He knows exactly what's about to happen. He just joined this team, and he knows exactly what happens when you do something stupid. Joe Judge is going to treat you like a child. And that I think is really, that's a part of the perspective from Joe Judge that I think permeates to me, and why it still resonates with players is when you do something so stupid that a mistake that you haven't made since the Pop Warner days, that's when Joe Judge is like, all right, You want to play like Pop Warner? I'll treat you like Pop Warner. You guys want to wrestle with each other? Okay, I'll treat you like that. And that's why I think it still works when you have that hard-nosed mentality.
Yeah, agreed. Now, the challenge that we have here is about one Daniel Jones, right? So, like, all these guys are getting into this pushing and shoving match, and Daniel Jones is like, I'm going to protect my team. And he goes diving right into the pile. He ends up in the middle, if not at the bottom of this melee brawl. And so, like, they interview him afterwards. He's like, I got to stick up for my teammates. I need to have the respect. And so, like, he's saying all the right things. And, like, the mentality is good for, like, any other player that's not the quarterback on your team, right? Like, I don't know. Did you feel the same way? Like, having him jump into a pile where people are brawling, it does not excite me. That is not a really good thing.
Well, my only thing about it is it's like nobody got hurt in this. And I know, like, theoretically something could have happened in there, but Logan Ryan isn't planning on getting in there and really punching Evan Ingram, in the rib cage and trying to crack something. Like, nothing is really going on in there that is going. Now, someone can roll an ankle and tweak something 100%.
What if someone stepped on Daniel Jones's hand? Like,
100%.
There's no reason for what if his body's like this and, like, some 300-pound lineman turns his shoulder and tweaks his shoulder? It's like for the amount of respect that he got from diving in the pile, the risk reward wasn't there. It's like, do you think Tom Brady would jump in that pile? Do you think Aaron Rodgers is Russell Wilson jumping in that pile? The answer is unequivocally no. They're not jumping in the pile.
Guess what? Aaron Rodgers doesn't have anything to prove. Russell Wilson doesn't have anything to prove. And I'm not saying that, like, that one of the boxes Daniel Jones has to check is, like, is he tough, right? And some of the humorous comparisons to Eli Manning, like, and everyone knows how I feel about Eli Manning. Everyone knows how this podcast feels about Eli Manning. But Daniel Jones is a completely different animal than Eli Manning. You've seen how Daniel Jones looks physically. Like, he has muscles. Eli Manning was a sweet baby noodle sack slinging Super Bowl rings all over town. And that's great. Like, but I think that there is a difference in the physicality of Daniel Jones. He's had some injury tweaks here early in his career, right? But I've always stayed away from the idea of, well, not the quarterback though. My God, you're still playing football, right? And if you're Daniel Jones, you're still a guy that's going to be tucking the ball and running in the upcoming season. You're going to end up under a pile of a couple of players that are trying to do some damage to you. So I don't hate it, and I don't hate it from the perspective of, I do like the commentary of, I'm not above the rest of my team. Like, hey, they're getting into a scrum. By the way, Ingram, right? He's been here my whole career. I want him to be really good this year for me. He's getting shoved. I'm going to get into a little bit. And I trust the idea, especially from the defensive perspective, outside of the incidental injuries that could happen, that everyone, Logan Ryan and all these guys, if you don't think they haven't gotten the clear message of, like, hey, a little, it all breaks out. Everyone's having a good time. A little poke, wrestle. Just, you roll Daniel Jones to the side. You turn him over like a hot dog on the grill. You roll him to the side and you keep going at the meat. Like, I typically, the quarterback always comes out of these things all right.
As we just talked about Carson Wentz getting hurt during a drill, we just talked about Dak Prescott with a sore shoulder. Like, people are getting hurt in training camp in non-contact injuries.
That's idea of prepared. Daniel Jones is prepared.
The idea that, listen, these are going to happen in the regular season, great. My idea is, like, let's eliminate the amount of them that happen prior to a meaningful game. Like, if it happens in a meaningful game and he's diving on a fumble and he hurts his shoulder, like, at least it's all for something. Like, saving Evan Ingram, it wasn't like Evan Ingram was dying in a burning.
Evan Ingram.
Yeah. But it wasn't like he was jumping into a burning building to go save Evan Ingram and he got third-degree burns on his arm. It was a shoving match in practice. It's like, just someone, I mean, Jason Garrett, anyone has to pull Daniel Jones.
Well, that's fine too. By the way,
Danny Dimes. I understand that you want to ingratiate yourself with this team, and this could be a building moment. But I will be honest, if you ever do that again, I will slap you upside your head. Like that's what has to be said.
Well, I was going to say that's probably where we can leave a relatively fun conversation around what happened in training camp. That's where the responsibility lies, is like, you want to see Daniel Jones being like, nope, I'm going to get in there. I'm going to mix it up with my guys. Like, I'm not going to let someone, on the defensive side push my guys around. And then you want Corey Clement, right? Or Evan Ingram, like if he's not directly in it, or a coach to be like, oh, and just, oh no, Danny, and just slow him down enough so he can't get involved, and then things get broken up, and he's not directly a part of it, and he still gets to be the one that wants to be a part of it with his team without having to physically be in the mix. Listen, we come out the other side, everyone makes it, and what do you think about then beyond now inside of this records? We had Evan Ingram, obviously a part of that there. Anything before we get into a little bit of an offensive line perspective, footnote, obviously about an addition since last time we were on, but anything around Evan Ingram, the wide receivers you want to touch on first?
Yeah, really, really quick. So the brawl took up the majority of the headlines, but what is really catching all the beat writers right now is two things. One, and Adam, we have to unpack this, is they literally said Evan Ingram is catching every single ball that is thrown anywhere in like a 5-yard radius of his body. There's a video of Daniel Jones throwing one behind him, and he's running full speed and goes and turns backwards and makes this ridiculous catch, turns it into a spinning move that would go for a touchdown. He has looked unbelievable in training camp. And all the beat writers like see all their comments in the comment section of like, yeah, can he do it in the game? Like he has stone hands, all this different stuff. And they're like, I don't know what to tell you other than what I'm watching. And this guy is catching literally every ball, right?
The only thing, I love it. It was said, he's on the team. I'm all fully behind him. I want him to do great. I think the easiest question would be, does he catch a lot of balls in training camp over the course of his career? You know what I mean? Like if we went back and looked and, do I go find the transcripts from the last 4 years? It's going to be like Evan Ingram catching every ball in training camp from Eli Manning. Evan Ingram looking great in training camp, right? If that's the carryover, then it's hard to put much stock in it. What I'd like to think is that we know that him and Joe Judge, they developed a good relationship, little back and forth repartee. There was even I'm trying to think of the other defensive player it was Julian Love, who's had a heck of an exchange with Joe Judge through the media around some times at the fairgrounds. But maybe this is turning a corner for Evan Ingram though, right? Maybe the new coaching regime really is looking at him, looking at his skill set and saying, no, we understand that you're this fast guy, you're a wide receiver, a tight end, Let's focus in on what we need you to really be good at. That's securing the ball first. Everything else, your natural athleticism will take over. If we get this box checked, then those things will handle themselves and you'll be a better player for it. That's where I'd love to think it's going because the talent has always been there. It's a matter of him meeting those expectations. Speaking
of talent, you turn it over to the wide receiving room and man, does Sterling Shepard look good. There was a video of him going against Isaac Yedem. And he basically put Yedem in a blender and had no idea where he was going. And the speed in which Shepard was making those cuts, I thought it was Kadarius Toney at first. That's how explosive he looked. And Adam, it's never been about his pass catching ability. It's never been about Shepard's athleticism. It's just been about whether Sterling Shepard can stay on the field for the Giants. Is he going to be there every Sunday? So and the way that you talked about looking at previous training camps about Evan Ingram catching the ball, I would double down and I'd bet to say that every single training camp that Sterling Shepard has been a part of, he has probably looked the part because, no contact, less injuries, all of the things that he does well just shine in training camp, right?
Oh, of course. Yeah. I mean, again, the number change doesn't hurt. He looks quicker. He looks faster, more agile.
Actually, he does. You're right. It is the number change. That's maybe why I thought it was Kadarius Toney. I'm like, this has got to be someone new. It can't be Sterling Shepard, right?
Well, and by the way, too, I mean, remember, he's coming into a potential, end of the contract. He wants to put his best foot forward. Technically, if you think about when players hit their prime, he's peaking. So you expect him to look really good right now. And if he can stay healthy, I expect him to have a career year now with Kenny Golladay on the field. If Evan Ingram's looking stronger, the addition of Kyle Rudolph, right? Darius Slayton in year number 3. This is such a bad one-to-one comparison to make. But but think about the way in which a Wes Welker has been used over the course of his career. If he can be quick, twitchy in tight quarters, that's where all of a sudden I think you're going to see him in that vein. It's probably what we expect Kadarius Toney to build into for the Giants. But when you hear the reports that they're not going to overload Kadarius Toney, and this is going to be a gradual process, as it is for all rookie wide receivers and rookies in general. This is a big year for Shepard, and every day that he looks great in training camp is another day that I get excited about him in the short term and maybe the long term. because we all know that I like guys that stick around. I like lifers for the New York Football Giants. I don't know the chances of that with Shepard, but I sure as heck hope that he puts the Giants in a difficult spot after this season. If not for himself, for the team, then for himself and what he'll be able to accomplish in free agency whenever that comes to pass.
Yeah, I mean, that's the tough part is you want to see Shepard do well. I would love to see him remain with the Giants. We just know if he has a really good year, that means a really big contract's coming. And when they drafted a first round talent, Tony, and they spent 18-19 million on Kenny Golladay, the musical chair starts to get a little interesting when the music stops at the end of the season. Like, who's got a chair? There may not be one available because can you really spend that much draft capital and that much money on your wide receiver room? But
100%.
That'd be a good problem to have, to be honest with you. So
exactly, yes, exactly. Make it the good problem of, oh my god, we have so much talent. It's like hard to choose which ones we want to keep. Either way, we're good, but
we're just like too explosive, Like, what am I supposed to do with that?
Now, the last little thing that we'll get on out the door on here, in the time since we were last on, the Giants did bring in Looney on the offensive line, has a tie with Jason Garrett from the Dallas days, can play guard and center, the middle three positions across the line there. He even made the joke about having to do some of those little bonus reps from Joe Judge and saying, hi, I didn't realize it was a thing. I had heard. He goes, no, listen, I could stand to get in a little bit of shape here, still trying to shake off the rust. He's getting into the mix. I only bring it up because, listen, you go and look at, I think we say this too often, where we say, PFF isn't the end all be all, and it's not. His grades are terrible over there if you look at them. And that's where I think it's the perfect example of, and that's why you don't hang your hat on PFF, because he's been a serviceable player on offensive lines for years. He's now in the mix. The perspective I just want to offer here, and it is basically at the end of the day, I was about to hit a semi-panic button here around the idea of, well, you got Shane Lemieux dealing with an injury concern. Now you bring in Looney. Does that maybe invite the idea of shuffling the deck on the inside? And is Nick Gates moving or not moving? Where is Looney going to fit in? Because Looney got reps at center. He's working, underneath with Daniel Jones behind him. So it's all on the table. I almost pushed the panic button and then was reminded by Pessimistic Mike, friend of the show, of my perspective coming out of last season. And it was that, by the way, footnote, Matt Peart coming in looking a little bit leaner, looking a little bit stronger, ready to accomplish something this year. The idea was if you came into this season and you could check the box of Thomas, I'm saying Gates at center, and Matt Peart at the right side. If you can check off confidently 3 spots on the offensive line, you're in good shape. You can look around the league, right? And teams don't have 5 studs. What you try to do is have 3 really upper level guys, and then you can fill in the gaps between. And that's what the Giants need to do. So I started to get a little bit, where's my brown paper bag to bring myself down from an anxiety attack when Lemieux went down. But now I think it is all right. And if Looney comes in and you do shuffle things with Gates, that's okay too. We just need to have that sense of, are we checking boxes with confidence? Okay, good. Now we can roll into the season. So, I think it's easy to waver and have those concerns. I am now getting back to neutral and seeing how training camp and the offseason continues here for the Giants.
My thoughts on the offensive line is actually just slightly different. What I think the Giants are doing is they're saying, okay, look, we don't necessarily know what Shane Lemieux is yet. We don't. Like, we gave him limited snaps. We kind of think he's the guy. We don't really know if Matt Peart is the guy yet, right? Like, we don't know. We're hoping, because that would be huge for the Giants. We really don't know if Will Hernandez is a starting caliber guard in this league. Like, we don't know. What we do know is if those guys are, what we expect them to be, their upside is higher than a guy like Nate Solder. It's higher than a guy like Zach Fulton. It's higher than a guy like Joe Looney, right? Like, it's just higher. Those are known commodities that will give us C to C plus, maybe C minus offensive line play in a pinch. So if the world comes crashing down for the New York Football Giants and all these guys don't work out, are young prospects,
it's the Wiggins and Loonies and Fultons of the world.
You just throw those guys in there, and you're like, at least, like, we know that 1 out of every 5 times we snap the ball, there's going to be pressure in Jones's face. Like, but that's what that's the bottom. When the bottom falls out, we have that, and we know that we are not going to be worse than this. What we're hoping is that with all these young guys, that Peart is the guy that we think he is. We think Hernandez will be better being on the right side with him. We think Shane Lemieux is better than what his Pro Football Focus grade is. We think Andrew Thomas is going to take the next step. We think Nick Gates is the guy. Like, if those things come to fruition, great. If they don't, at least we know, like, we have the C+ guys that are veterans, known commodities that are sitting right behind them that you could plug in any of those positions.
Yeah, and I'd like to think that Matt Peart isn't on that list. Like, I'd like to think that the Giants have confidence in Peart beyond. Like, he has to clearly be well above where they think about Shane Lemieux. I mean, you go back and do the eye test from last year. Again, likewise for Andrew Thomas, right? Loved his quote when asked about it. He said, "Run your own race." When they were talking about where do you look when you see the other top picks at left tackle, run your own race. So he's trying to do his thing. I like that. And I don't think that we'll see this shuffling of the deck either, to your point. Like, I think that the Looney, it's the Fulton, it's the Wiggins. I primarily look at those 2 guard spots. That's where I align with you, where you say, listen, Shane Lemieux? Yeah, we want it. Do we think that Hernandez can turn this thing around? Yeah, maybe. But if not, we've got 3, 4 veteran guys that we'll throw in there and see who sticks there and who combines with Nick Gates and alongside Thomas best, right? Any of these guys. Hey, Looney, if you start clicking with Thomas in training camp, it's your job, because we want to know that we can also button up potentially the 1, 2, 3, right? Tackle, guard, center. So those are the kind of combinations I think they're looking for in camp. But I'm not far off from you, right? I think this is still the idea. It's evolving. It doesn't make Giants fans excited to think that, but the offensive line is an evolution, and it is yet to come to its final state.
I think the last thing, and at the end of the day, for me, it's very simple. You bring in veteran leadership behind some of these young, promising prospects that you have, because you can't have another young, promising prospect backing up Shane Lemieux, so that if that doesn't work, then you bring that person in. If that doesn't work, then what do you do, right? Like, you have to have this veteran leadership behind, where in case of emergency, break glass. That's the type of signing that Joe Looney is for this offensive line. But let's hope that what we think about the starting offensive lineman is actually true.
Very much so, my friend. And as we remind you to follow us on OGP, One Giant Podcast, on social media, rate, review, subscribe to the podcast as well. Heard a rumor, Colombo coming out of retirement as an offensive lineman, looking to tap into those ties with Jason Garrett for the New York Football Giants. Until next time, friends, enjoy that round of golf. Watch out for the sun reflecting off those pants. And as Andy Makowitz would want, need, and demand the people know,
as always, let's go Big Blue.